Well, welcome to the 700 Club. Iran is leveraging the conflict between Israel and Hezbollah to pressure peace talks with the U.S. President Trump says he personally stepped in to secure a ceasefire between Israel and Hezbollah.
Just hours after a series of phone calls and social media posts by the president, Hezbollah's attacks on Israel continued. Joshua Swanson reports from Jerusalem.
A flurry of high-stakes diplomacy erupted after Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu drew a red line over Hezbollah's ongoing attacks on towns in northern Israel.
I have instructed the IDF to strike terrorist targets in Beirut. There will not be a situation in which Hezbollah attacks our cities and our citizens, and its terrorist headquarters in Beirut remain out of bounds.
That declaration triggered a threat by Iran to walk away from negotiations with the U.S. over Israel's war with Hezbollah. At that point, President Trump intervened. In a Truth Social post, Trump said he spoke directly with Netanyahu. Trump wrote he turned his troops around. Thank you, Bibi. Trump added, I also had a conversation with representatives of the leaders of Hezbollah, and they agreed to stop shooting at Israel. The announcement came as Axios reported that Trump sharply criticized Netanyahu during a phone call, warning that further military action would derail efforts to reach a deal with Iran. That message was echoed in Tehran.
We emphasized and continue to emphasize that a ceasefire in Lebanon is an integral part of any ceasefire and any final agreement to end the war.
Iran has already suspended indirect message exchanges with the United States and is demanding the immediate cessation of Israeli military operations in Gaza and Lebanon. Yet despite the diplomatic push, attacks last night continued as the Israel Defense Forces reported intercepting 2 Hezbollah rockets launched towards the city of Sfad in northern Israel, and a Hezbollah drone struck a military position in the western Galilee. No injuries were reported. From his side, Prime Minister Netanyahu stated, I spoke this evening with President Trump and told him that if Hezbollah does not stop attacking our cities and civilians, Israel will strike terrorist targets in Beirut. This position remains unchanged. Retired General Jack Keane told Fox News the scale of the violations gives Israel every reason to respond.
The Iranians have fired 2,400 or so missiles and drones into northern Israel in that short span of time. We actually have justification right now to go back into military operations. The president is certainly full aware of that.
For now, President Trump is working to preserve both the fragile ceasefire and a possible deal with Iran. Yet the future of any deal remains on shaky ground. Joshua Swanson, CBN News, Jerusalem.
CBN Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell joins us now. So, Chris, there are reports of some pretty strong language between the president and the prime minister. Is Iran's strategy not just to drive a wedge between the U.S. and Israel, but between Israel and the entire world?
It seems so by the language that came out after that talk. Definitely Iran's strategy to drive a wedge between Israel and the U.S. to pressure President Trump, then to pressure Netanyahu and Israel. There is one other version coming out in some of the Israeli media today of those conversations between Trump and Netanyahu that said it was tense, but not necessarily as personal as that initial report. The discussions ending, as Joshua said in his report, Israel agreeing to a ceasefire if Hezbollah keeps the ceasefire. But the strategy, Gordon's real, designed to survive, to drive a wedge between the U.S. and Israel. But some people here in Israel are concerned about the possibility of maybe giving Iran and even Hezbollah a lifeline.
Well, what's the leverage that Iran believes it has over the U.S.? Is it the midterm elections? Is it our divided politics? What's their leverage?
I think it would both those that you mentioned. Also, the Strait of Hormuz, trying to keep that blocked. The midterms, the price of oil. When I was in the U.S., I know one of the major docking points for everybody is the price of oil. Isolationists in his own party. And then the American public not interested in boots on the ground. You need boots on the ground to really reopen the Strait of Hormuz. And they also, Gordon, have patience. And they feel they can outlast the American political will. On the other hand, Iran has a weakness, and that's money. They need money to survive. They're currently operating on financial fumes. They are losing maybe $500 million a day. They need to pay the IRGC, the militias, government employees. So they're bleeding. And Secretary of Treasury says the regime is at the end of their tether financially. They seized $1 billion in cryptocurrency just a few days ago. One question over here is Trump waiting for them to implode financially. And we'll see what happens if they can survive financially.
What's your prediction if they run out of money to pay the Republican Guard, so the very people who are propping the regime up and from all reports are currently running the country? So if they can't pay them, what happens?
Well, it puts them in a dilemma because from what I've heard, maybe up to half of the IRGC and the militias that Iran has brought in from Pakistan, Iraq, and Afghanistan, they're there for the money. Now, whether or not, if they don't get paid, do they defect? Do they leave? It remains to be seen. And could that be part of the cracks in the regime? Certainly what some people are hoping and praying for is the financial pressure can lead to maybe defections and or cracks in that edifice that the IRGC has set up for decades.
Well, the president said Hezbollah wants a ceasefire with Israel. I find that, frankly, hard to believe, but it just seems to be against their very nature, their very reason for existing. So can there be peace with them as long as they're in Lebanon? Can there actually be peace?
I talked to a resident up in the north earlier today. She's also an expert on Hezbollah. She's very disappointed. She doesn't believe that you can negotiate with this kind of radical ideology. She feels it's a dangerous precedent. And as you said, that this is what they believe. This is their raison d'etre, their reason for being. And whether or not you can actually negotiate with this, many people feel it won't happen.
Talk to me about it seems there's a switch in the propaganda wars. And so the switch is Israel is the oppressor. They're not the victim. Israel is committing war crimes when it really was Hamas committing Hezbollah committing war crimes. And now we're seeing a switch in Iran where they're saying we don't trust the U.S. negotiators. Is this all part of an elaborate PR, and it's obviously very sophisticated, but a PR campaign to reverse the narrative?
I think it is, and I think this is sort of the negotiation expertise that the Iranian regime has. As we've mentioned before, President Trump said they've never won a war but never lost negotiations. Sometimes some people have said this is not the art of the deal. It's the art of the delay, and the Iranians see this so-called ceasefire or agreement as a hudna. And I know we've talked about this before, Gordon, but it's just a temporary pause in the fighting so they can gain strength, fight again. It's not what a Western mind thinks about, where two sides agreed to a lasting peace. And that goes all the way back to the beginning of Islam, back to the 7th century. And then I was listening earlier today, Gordon, to the son of Rafsanjani. He was one of the former late leading clerics. And he said, if the agreement is not in our interest, we'll tear it up later. And it was referring to President Trump in his first term, stopped the Iranian nuclear deal. He says we can do the same. And they're not just looking at the midterms. They're looking at the 2028 elections with President Trump's not in office. And then they can deal with another president, maybe much more amenable than President Trump.
Well, Chris Mitchell, thanks so much for joining with us and being with us. I just have to note that thank you especially for being here today with us and giving your insights. Your brother passed away. May his memory be a blessing, and we thank you for being with us today.
Thanks so much, Gordon. I appreciate it deeply. My family and friends do as well. My brother was a great doctor, even a better man.
All right. Well, thanks again for being with us, and thanks for being the watchman on the wall. Well, in other news, a judge's ruling and GOP backlash has President Trump reconsidering a controversial fund to compensate victims of government harassment. John Jessup has more on that story from our CBN News Bureau in Washington. John?
That is right, Gordon. The administration announced the $1.8 billion anti-weaponization fund 2 weeks ago. The Department of Justice is now pausing it in compliance with a court order. The plan also faces opposition from GOP leaders who are concerned about oversight of the distribution of funds and concerns payouts might go to people who attacked police in the January 6th Capitol riot. Texas Senator Ted Cruz described a closed-door meeting between senators and Acting Attorney General Todd Blanche as, quote, one of the roughest meetings I've seen in my time in the Senate. The president is said to be reconsidering whether to go forward with the fund. Well, a landmark lawsuit in Florida is challenging a major artificial intelligence company over safety concerns. The state is suing OpenAI and CEO Sam Altman, accusing the company of deliberately concealing severe safety risks of its chatbot, ChatGPT, especially towards minors. Prosecutors claim the chatbot has offered instructions to children to harm themselves. They also claim the suspect in last year's deadly Florida State University shooting used ChatGPT to plan the attack.
Sam Altman and ChatGPT have chosen the AI race over the safety and security of our kids.
OpenAI responded in a statement that it believes minors need significant protection and that they have put in place protections and policies. In regard to the Florida attack, the company said that ChatGPT provided factual responses to questions with information that could be found broadly across public sources on the internet. State officials, Gordon, say the company could be liable for billions of dollars and want to force it to change its programming. I think this might be the opening salvo and challenges and lawsuits against AI platforms, Gordon.
Well, we're going to be seeing a lot of lawsuits going forward against AI, particularly involving minors. So we've already seen how it's been used, and it's just horrible to contemplate that AI would be planning some kind of attack at a university or any public place. But the ones that are just absolutely horrific is giving advice on suicide. And why there can't be guardrails is beyond me. But anything that would promote harm to any individual, but especially from minors, absolutely not. And there needs to be very comprehensive legislation that's not some patch quilt thing that, you know, every state gets to have their own piece of it. But I hope Congress can come together for everyone's sake to say, let's rein this in. Let's have some protections, especially for our children.